It was an honor. Enkrid was half dead from fending off the knight's sword, but after 2 days of suffering he was somewhat better. His monstrous recovery abilities had proven their worth once again. Of course, he wasn't in perfect condition.
I can't seem to get any strength in my grip.
Perhaps it was fortunate that his shoulder had dislocated right after blocking the sword. If he had held out longer, the strain would have spread from his forearm to all the muscles in his arm. His physical condition still wasn't great, but he couldn't afford to skip the gathering. No, to say he couldn't rest might not be accurate. Rather, it was more correct to say he couldn't just sit idly by. Those around him didn't leave him alone, anyway.
Captain.
From Helma to the soldiers he had become acquainted with, they all started visiting Enkrid's tent one by one.
How about a bite of eel?
Even the soldier who had been cooking came by.
You were magnificent.
A commander from the scouting unit also made an appearance. There were even a few soldiers who used to make snide remarks. Some of them looked a bit awkward, but they eventually showed their faces.
It was an honor to fight alongside you.
They all said in unison. Enkrid silently gazed at them. The excitement they had when they entered disappeared as soon as Enkrid didn't respond. All of them closed their mouths. They couldn't even move their lips. An awkward silence settled. Cold winter wind slipped through the entrance of the tent, leaving a chilly sensation in the air. Some of the soldiers felt their hair stand on end.
Did I overdo it back then? That seems to be the case.
The soldiers began to look uneasy.
Captain?
Helma, unable to bear the tension, finally spoke. Enkrid looked at Helma without a hint of a smile. There was no need to gather his thoughts. It was something he always believed. However, he wanted to look over their faces before he spoke. He wanted his words to be more than just empty chatter, dissipating into the air. He wanted them to carry sincerity. He'd learned this from Krang. So, Enkrid did exactly that. He acted as he had been taught. It brought a cold, biting wind to the atmosphere, but what was more important than that was conveying sincerity. Enkrid firmly believed this.
I do as well.
Enkrid opened his mouth. Hadn't he spoken of honor when he took the knight's sword? For Enkrid, fighting alongside these men was a similar, if not greater, honor. Why wouldn't it be? They were men who had taken up spears to protect their families, their friends, and their lives. Sure, some of them might have taken up arms for a few coins of krona, but would that make any difference? In the end, they all had to fight for the comrades standing beside them. There was a reason comradeship existed as a concept. They were all the same in that regard. These were the men who risked their lives to scout enemy territory. They became the eyes and hands of the army. Without them, Enkrid couldn't have fought as he did. So how could this not be an honor? For the same reason, there was no need to hide his respect for them. As his lips opened, he simply spoke the words that needed to be said.
It was an honor.
He continued the words he had cut off earlier. After a brief silence, one of the soldiers slapped his own head. A crisp sound rang out.
Ah, damn, I'm an idiot.
The soldier who had hit himself muttered under his breath. He was one of the soldiers who had been particularly critical of Enkrid. Helma saw this and burst into laughter. The soldier then spoke to Helma with a solemn expression.
Go ahead. The captain would allow it.
What the hell are you talking about, you idiot?
Helma grabbed the soldier by the neck and tucked him under her arm. Even though he was choking, the soldier didn't ask to be released. But was it really all right to call Enkrid captain and not their actual commander? When asked if it was okay, the middle-aged man standing next to him, holding a bottle of wine, responded,
It's fine. The captain is the captain.
Upon further inquiry, this man turned out to be the commander and leader of this unit, and he was the first to speak such words. But it didn't end there. Nurat came over and asked,
Is the captain all right?
He heard someone whispering to Kreis, as if they had grown close. Nurat was the personal guard and adjutant under Battalion Commander Garrett. In other words, Enkrid should have been referred to as company commander at best. But she also called him captain without hesitation. Listening to everything going on, Enkrid more or less figured out the situation.
Hey, Captain, tell us a story. I'm dying to know what you've been up to so far.
Even Garrett said things like that. On the battlefield, he had charged alone into enemy lines, wielding his sword. From the very first day, the battle had tipped in their favor because of that. Although he had gone missing and various things had happened, what was the most shocking sight in the eyes of all the soldiers? It was the sight of one man's back. The sword wielded by that one man, the force created by the man named Enkrid.
Captain's sword.
Thanks to someone who had seen him fight and given him a strange nickname, everyone started calling him Captain. The medic who treated his dislocated shoulder only contributed to the spread of an even stranger nickname.
They've also started calling you the Sword of Endurance, you know?
Kreis, with his keen ears, had heard that and shared it with Enkrid. Considering it was a name given for enduring pain incredibly well, it was surprisingly dignified. In reality, though, Mad Company Commander was the nickname that circulated the most, but those sorts of names tend to fade quickly. The victory celebration lasted for 2 days. Enkrid spent that time recovering from the wear and tear on his body, fully appreciating the importance of rest. In other words, he ate, drank, and rested.
Eel, trout.
From various seafood to roasted piglet, and from wine to expensive whiskey, all kinds of treats were served.
To the captain's sword, let's eat and die.
Garrett turned out to be stronger with alcohol than expected. Enkrid had never lost when it came to drinking, but Garrett drank exceptionally well. He downed 3 or 4 bottles of hard liquor by himself and still sang with a clear voice. It wasn't the first time it had happened, and some of the soldiers joined in the singing with chants in between.
Oorah.
The world calls us.
Oorah.
They say we sell our swords for gold.
Oorah.
So we sell our swords for gold.
Oorah.
We are mercenaries.
Oorah.
We sell our swords for gold.
Oorah.
We stake our lives on loyalty as mercenaries. It was a song Enkrid had heard before in his travels across the continent. But it was the first time he'd heard it sung so smoothly. Garrett's voice seemed naturally gifted. If his swordsmanship were to be compared, it would be like a straight yet soft sword. His voice burst out at the right moments and then softened again when needed. Amid the chants of Yura from the soldiers, Garrett finished his song and approached Enkrid, who had been sitting quietly, and said,
I've already written a song about you.
That comment made Enkrid tilt his head in confusion. A song about me?
I'll sing it for you later.
Garrett laughed heartily, patting his belly. His appearance was likable, and his personality matched. He was genuinely a good person. It was clear why Marcus had placed him in this position. Come to think of it, Graham, the Lord of the Border Guard and their battalion commander hadn't seemed concerned about betrayal either. It was Kreis who had been worried back then. Now it seemed clear how unnecessary those worries had been.
All right, I'll listen to it later.
After a few drinks, the victory, and all the lessons learned, he had received the knight's sword and discussed honor. Now celebrating victory with those he could call comrades. That too was enjoyable. Some of the soldiers whispered among themselves as they observed him, remarking that even a man like him was still human. Of course, he was human, not a monster.
You guys don't know him well yet. The captain will drink and party like this, but come tomorrow morning, he'll be training right away. I'll bet anything on it. He'll be out training at dawn again. The man's crazy!
Kreis, seemingly quite drunk, started talking loudly. In the middle of his speech, he even slapped his thighs a couple of times. It was a joke, but he bet his manhood on it.
Really?
If you don't believe me, bet on it!
It was a natural flow. Kreis started collecting a few coins, mostly silver and copper, from some of the soldiers. Enkrid only listened to the first few words before dismissing it. Kreis's antics were predictable. There was no need to pay close attention. His eyes met Ragna's, who was drinking in one corner. When Ragna gave him a small nod, Enkrid raised his cup in acknowledgement.
Thank you.
It was meant for the ferryman, but in truth, it was a sentiment meant for everyone, including Ragna. He had developed a technique known as the crushing sword. What if Ragna hadn't been there during that process? He would have found a way, no matter what. Enkrid would have kept going. But it was also true that Ragna's presence had shortened the time it took. In fact, Enkrid now realized that he needed that man. If Ragna ever decided to leave, Enkrid would probably ask if he was serious, at least once. That's why he had told Jackson, who had left for a brief errand, to come back as if it were the most natural thing in the world.
Am I being selfish?
To keep people around, to keep them close. Was that really the right thing to do?
Am I just building a wall to hide my own inadequacies?
It was an extension of the thoughts that had crossed his mind in his youth. Of course, those thoughts were now irrelevant. Inadequate abilities, huh? Enkrid clenched and then opened his fist. The pain was decreasing in real time. It was thanks to his regeneration, based on the isolation technique, that his body was healing. His body had changed. The way he wielded his sword had changed. Though his mindset hadn't significantly shifted from the past, something within him had clearly transformed.
No.
They weren't walls, they were friends, comrades, sometimes mentors, sometimes fellow soldiers fighting alongside him. He would ask them when the time came. If they stood at a crucial crossroads, he would definitely ask them, or rather, he would tell them that they could leave if they wanted to. For example, if the path ahead was as certain as death, like this time,
I will use today.
it was a mindset that even curses could be utilized. Instead of a passive approach, it was now an active one. But that didn't mean his determination to survive the day had changed. If he couldn't influence even this day, he would let them leave. That was the right path. Enkrid didn't overthink it. There was no agony. He simply made a decision.
Let's eat and die.
Helma, shirtless except for something covering her chest, shouted from one side. Wasn't she cold? Her abs were visible, as were the scars on her body.
You're my woman.
One soldier, trying to act bold, was promptly punched in the head and stomach. He rolled over to the side and started vomiting his guts out. Yeah, sure, she's really your woman. Enkrid let out a small laugh. For today he pushed aside any unnecessary thoughts. He focused on resting.
As much as your body needs rest, so does your mind, brother.
Hadn't Auden said that? Even thoughts were forgotten. For just a single day he didn't think about anything. He was simply present in reality. He spent the day in the never-stopping flow of time. Since today wouldn't come back, there was nothing more valuable. Enkrid smiled, ate, and drank.
Cook for us.
A soldier who was a good cook approached and mumbled something, and Enkrid replied,
Why are you telling me that?
Come buy it from me.
This guy had a knack for business. Maybe not on Kreis's level, but not bad.
All right.
It would be an honor.
Two soldiers who had been watching from the side suddenly chimed in.
I as well, it's an honor.
Were they trying to mimic him? Clearly they were too drunk and out of their minds. Enkrid laughed and smacked both of their heads.
Ouch.
The two soldiers laughed as they were hit, a poor attempt at imitation. The next morning, despite only having slept for 2 hours, Enkrid continued his training. He wasn't pushing himself too hard, just warming up his body and generating some heat, but a few soldiers who woke up half dead from hangovers rubbed their eyes as they watched him.
He drank, ate, and partied like that yesterday, and now he's up at dawn training? Is this even real?
What could they do? Enkrid's body had become more comfortable training than not. Naturally, Kreis made a few coins off his bet. After 3 days of rest, Enkrid had recovered enough. It was time to leave. Since he still couldn't walk properly, Garrett provided a carriage for him. Just before he left, Garrett approached Enkrid.
Company Commander Enkrid, do you have something to say?
Was he going to pester him again to tell stories about his battles experiences as he had done before? It wasn't a difficult task, but being stared at with such sparkling eyes by a middle-aged man right in front of him was a bit much. He had even mentioned writing a song about him, though Enkrid hadn't heard it yet.
How about becoming the battalion commander of the Green Pearl?
Garrett offered. He leaned against the carriage and yawned as he spoke, completely relaxed. There wasn't a hint of tension. Enkrid had received similar offers before, and to be honest, even better ones, which he had declined. Like becoming the battalion commander of the border guard, or even a lord.
No, I'm not interested.
He rejected it immediately, causing Garrett to chuckle.
I figured you'd say that.
Then why did you ask?
I'm retiring,
And why is that relevant?
because my successor will probably have a hard time.
When Enkrid gave him a questioning look, Garrett continued.
Being in this position, you get a lot of pressure from the central government. Right now, it seems like Lord Marcus is blocking some of it, but who knows how long that will last. Plus, the way things are going, it's not much better than a dog's life, is it?
At first, Enkrid didn't understand what he meant.
You're saying a civil war might break out?
Kreis interrupted from behind. It was another one of those conversations only the two of them understood, but Enkrid got the gist of it. Defeating the external threat from Aspen had been good, but in some ways, it might have set off a chain of events leading to something worse. Of course, it wasn't an immediate concern. Enkrid wasn't worried about it either, at least not for now.
The knight's sword.
He was too busy digesting what he had internalized. In other words, he sat in the carriage and drifted into a light sleep as they headed back to the border guard. Since their captain didn't seem too concerned, Kreis wasn't either. He didn't believe anything would happen immediately. When they arrived at the border guard, the first familiar faces they saw greeted them.
You're back?
The wandering Teresa welcomes the captain. Brother, was your journey peaceful?
Enkrid realized he was truly back. Wah! A loud cheer erupted from behind Rem, Teresa, and Auden. It was only natural. The news from the Green Pearl garrison had spread like wildfire to the border guard. The return of the hero who had defeated the Black Blade bandits, the cultists, and even the Aspen forces. It would have been stranger if there had been no cheering at all. Enkrid noticed something similar to flower petals falling over his head. There weren't many, just a few scattered, dried petals. He also saw who had thrown them, a few small children and some women. One child and one woman in particular seemed familiar to him. The child's bright eyes were fixed on him.
He said he wanted to be an herbalist.
It was winter now, so they must have searched for flowers that bloom even in the cold. After finding those petals, they would have picked them and dried them carefully. How much effort must they have put in for this? White and pink dried petals fell softly over his head. There weren't many, but the sentiment behind them was clearly conveyed, and Enkrid smiled. He showed a smile. The child, whose dream was to be an herbalist, saw Enkrid's face. Seeing their hero smile brought the child immense joy. Even though their fingers had blistered and cracked from gathering winter petals, it would remain a fond memory. Enkrid walked past the child. He walked further in. As he stepped forward, Rem came up on his right.
Had a good time out there?
Rem asked.
Quite.
Even though the news had spread, they wouldn't have known every single detail of what happened.
Brother, your body's taken quite a beating.
Auden said from behind. Beating? It was more like he'd been on the brink of death. He'd been pierced all over with quarrels, bled profusely, and just when he thought he could rest, a knight had come along and cut him again. The fact that he was even this well after eating and resting at the Green Pearl garrison was remarkable.
I'm just a bit bruised.
He answered with a half-joking tone.
My Lord Father above, why have you given me such a fragile body?
Auden's prayer was clearly directed at Enkrid's condition. Objectively speaking, Enkrid's physique was almost as developed as a beastman's. Even without working out, his natural muscle definition was impressive, enough to call him a beastman. Being comparable to them meant his body was strong, but in Auden's eyes, it might still have looked lacking. After all, Auden, the giant bear-like priest, had the physique of a mix between a beastman and a giant.
There's still room for improvement.
Auden muttered, but Enkrid just kept walking. Ragna soon joined on his left. His right arm was still wrapped in bandages not yet healed, but the wound on his thigh had mended well enough that he could walk normally. Though Ragna had his own injuries, aside from his arm, he was in relatively good shape now. Following behind Rem was Dunbachel, and Teresa limped along beside Auden, adding to the group. The cheering grew even louder.
Rem the Immortal.
Even the soldiers, along with the citizens, vividly remembered the fight against the Black Blade bandits and the cultists, so it wasn't surprising to hear someone call Rem the Immortal. There were also occasional cheers directed at Auden and Teresa. The nickname Giant Siblings was amusing, but no one laughed out loud. Dunbachel, meanwhile, complained about why she didn't have a nickname. As they walked along, more shouts rang out.
Take me.
A mad woman shouted at them from the crowd.
What do you want me to take?
Rem shot back.
Not you. I wouldn't take it even if you gave it to me.
The fact that Rem could exchange banter like that amidst the cheering crowd showed that the shouting woman was no ordinary person herself. Upon closer inspection, Enkrid recognized her as a merchant who was raising 2 children on her own in the marketplace. He'd seen her a few times in passing. The skills honed from a life of relentless survival hadn't left him. That resilience and toughness were certainly worthy of respect. Cheers continued to erupt from all around, and the name Enkrid was chanted over and over. Half of the preparations for this triumphant return had been organized by the lord of the castle, while the other half was the spontaneous participation of the townsfolk. In truth, even the lord's participation was as voluntary as the townspeople's. It was a welcome born from the heart. As Enkrid thought about his return to the border guard, he wondered, what if Aspen had won? How would anyone cope with such a terrible outcome? What would the royal court think of a lord who got beaten so soon after being appointed? No, more importantly, what action would they take? He'd be lucky if his head wasn't chopped off for the failure. This was why even the Lord himself was cheering wildly like a beast.
So handsome. The sword of endurance, the great sword.
Hearing the variety of nicknames thrown at him, Enkrid was reminded once again of how fast words spread, faster than anything that left the mouth. Hadn't the news reached them before the carriage did? Of course. This was partially because a forward scouting unit had been sent ahead to the border guard, and they had spread the word. The rest of the battalion, apart from those wounded like Enkrid, had already returned, so it made sense that the news had spread quickly. Walking through the cheers, Enkrid patted the head of the child who dreamed of becoming an herbalist. Then he nodded politely to a middle-aged woman selling spiced jerky, and when the innkeeper Vanessa shouted,
Marry me,
he retorted with,
Are you crazy?
The whole way back, Enkrid had been busy reflecting on the lessons and experiences he'd gained from these days of today. Perhaps that's why he hadn't anticipated the warm reception. Maybe that's why it felt all the more welcoming. It would be a lie to say that, when he first set out to become a knight, he hadn't dreamed of a moment like this. There were children he had protected, mothers who had thanked him for saving their sons. There was even a craftsman who had gifted him boots. Inside the walls of the city, there were people living their daily lives, and it was his sword that had protected them, so it would be a lie to say that didn't bring him satisfaction. Yet the world would still be ruthless. In the demon realm, monsters would emerge endlessly, and those monsters would spawn more beasts. Wars fueled by the interests of various races would always be accompanied by death. Victory, the knight who ends battles. The end, the knight who stands at the world's last moment. Enkrid thought about his dreams as he walked into the barracks. It was the middle of winter, so it would be some time before spring arrived. For others, the days ahead might not seem long, but for Enkrid, it had been a grueling return from the battlefield, where 3 days had felt like a lifetime.
Did you finally get rid of that stray cat?
While Enkrid was resting in the barracks, Rem came up to him and suddenly asked. Before he could answer, Rem nodded to himself.
You did good. You did good.
He was referring to Jackson, and if Enkrid had really abandoned him, Rem would have been even more pleased. Though, judging by his tone, he didn't seem to believe it. It didn't seem like Rem cared much. He was just asking for the sake of it, so Enkrid gave a vague reply.
Do I really have the power to get rid of him?
Then if you didn't abandon him, where did that prickly cat go?
In fact, the feline-like panther, Esther, was nowhere to be seen. She must have been busy since she disappeared as soon as they arrived.
Could it be that he's dead?
Enkrid asked, curious about Rem's reaction. Why hadn't anyone considered the possibility that Jackson was dead? After all, Enkrid had faced death countless times in his battle with Aspen. Rem snorted in disdain.
Like that bastard would die so easily.
It was roundabout, but it meant he recognized Jackson's skill. Thinking about it that way, did Rem think the same about him? That he wouldn't die easily? As if reading his thoughts, Rem continued speaking right after.
The captain has some sort of thing with the goddess of luck, so I figured you'd make it out alive.
It was a ridiculous statement, but from another person's perspective, it might have seemed true. How had he survived? If someone asked him that, honestly, he would struggle to give a proper answer.
Just lucky.
He could usually brush things off with a single line like that, but this time it didn't feel right. Rem quickly lost interest in Jackson, the stray cat. Instead, he started poking Enkrid's side, urging him to explain what had happened. Enkrid began recounting the events. Every now and then, Auden would interject to add his own comments.
Dislocated? It's because you lack muscle, brother. Just build back muscles thick enough that quarrels won't pierce through them, brother.
Muscles that couldn't be pierced by arrows? What was he talking about? Unless you had the hardened skin of a giant, that was impossible. It wasn't just Rem and Auden who were listening. Everyone was paying attention. Even Ragna was keenly focused. Surprisingly, the one who seemed most engaged was Kreis. For Kreis, it made sense. He had wanted to ask Enkrid back at the Green Pearl, but there hadn't been an opportunity. That annoying guy Garrett had kept the captain busy the whole time. He had wanted to ask during the carriage ride, but Enkrid had been resting, his eyes closed, not opening them once. There had been no chance to interrupt, so now was his moment.
How did he manage to escape?
Kreis had mentally retraced the battlefield where Enkrid had escaped. He had scoured it thoroughly, inspecting every detail. What had Aspen's commander done? He'd analyzed the traces and tried to reverse engineer what had happened.
Sorcery, magic.
Though he hadn't caught every detail, Kreis had heard enough to piece things together. The conclusion was simple. They had thrown everything they had to try and take out one person. Kreis blamed himself for not foreseeing it.
I almost got the captain killed with my own tactics.
It had been his idea to introduce more variables, after all. Even though it was Enkrid who had taken action, the choice had ultimately been his. Kreis realized he had been completely outplayed.
They saw right through me.
His intentions had been fully read by the enemy. It was an embarrassing realization. He often wondered what exactly went through the minds of the commanders within his unit. Why couldn't they see the obvious? At first, Kreis had thought they were just pretending not to notice, but now he understood. Everyone thinks differently.
I was arrogant.
His self-reflection was brief. Enkrid had already assured him it was fine, so he didn't dwell on negative feelings. Still, one question lingered in his mind.
How did you manage to escape?
Kreis finally voiced the question that had been on his mind. The enemy had prepared a trap that was inescapable, a hunting ground where the very earth was like a net. With 1,000 soldiers and terrain shaped to their advantage, they had created a situation where no one could escape, unless perhaps they were a knight. But was Enkrid a knight? No, he wasn't. There had been a knight, though, someone who had once crossed swords with him. Kreis had been somewhat relieved to see that the knight had left with a look of satisfaction, but still he had been on edge, worried that the knight might return half-mad, seeking to finish the job. The fear had clung to him, tightening around his heart. How many knights did Aspen even have? 3? But for one of them to come here just to fight the captain? It was hard to believe. That's why he had to ask. How did Enkrid escape? He wasn't a knight, and he hadn't predicted the enemy's strategy. He had walked right into their trap. He had fallen into their snare. Was it really possible to escape just through luck?
Unless the goddess of luck herself had grabbed him by the wrist and pulled him out.
It didn't make sense. Kreis had always been a realist, grounded in logic since childhood. His cold, rational mind assessed the situation. Luck couldn't have been enough. Kreis's eyes were serious. It wasn't a big deal to explain it, was it? Since Enkrid had nothing to hide, he answered honestly.
Instinct.
Silence followed. The winter wind howled outside the barracks. Rem was the first to react. He burst into laughter.
I knew it would be something like that.
The others began to react as well.
Instinct?
Kreis tilted his head in confusion, while Auden began to pray.
Father above, did you watch over him?
Dunbachel twitched her nose and asked in a cautious tone.
And how exactly do you train this instinct?
Of course, no one answered. Teresa just stared at Enkrid. He had never once lied to her since they'd met, so she knew he was telling the truth now, too. It was astounding. Where did this man's abilities end? Was it really possible to escape a battlefield like that on pure instinct? Even though her body was injured, Teresa's desire surged within her. She wanted to swing her sword. She wanted to stand opposite him with her shield raised. As her spirit flared up, Auden gently intervened, speaking in a soft tone.
Sister,
He said, placing a hand on her shoulder to calm her down. The message was clear. If she didn't control herself, she would get hurt. Teresa knew that, in her current state, she couldn't fight to her full potential. She also had no intention of picking a fight with Auden, knowing full well he could easily overpower her. She wasn't a beast, after all, just a half-blood giant.
Yes, I know. Wanderer Teresa can restrain herself.
She replied, referring to herself objectively and acknowledging that this was a moment where she needed to hold back. Meanwhile, Ragnar had dozed off in a corner at some point. He'd seemed interested in the conversation for a moment, but as usual, Ragnar had returned to his indifferent self. Despite the cheers they had just received and the fact that his name had been among them, he remained unchanged, uninterested in the world around him. Kreis, deep in thought over Enkrid's words, finally spoke up again.
Could you explain in more detail?
It wasn't a story that could be summed up with just the word instinct. Enkrid calmly elaborated, and Kreis finally understood.
You're talking about a sense of detecting danger? A sense of seeing the flow of the battlefield? Does that kind of thing actually work?
Kreis muttered, and inwardly, Enkrid nodded in agreement. Yes, it did work, but it wasn't easy. To develop that instinct, he had to face death in countless ways. Not that he had any complaints about it. He was satisfied with what he had gained from it. On the journey back, during his light sleep, Enkrid had been busy organizing what he'd learned from the experience. There were even more things he had realized and understood.
That's incredible!
Though it hadn't directly involved him, Kreis's eyes gleamed with admiration. It was curious, really. There was no reward like gold involved, yet his interest was piqued. As days flew by after Enkrid's return, there were talks about holding a banquet. But for now, everyone was too busy cleaning up after the battle. First, they had to deal with the bodies of the fallen soldiers and the carcasses of the beasts. The hides of the wolf-like beasts could be worth something if skinned properly. Although tanning was required, the border guard had a leather-working guild right there within the garrison. Still, it was a task that required much effort. They had to deliver condolences and compensation to the families of the dead soldiers, bury or cremate the bodies. For a while, the fires outside the border guard's perimeter would not stop burning. Graham genuinely wanted to host a banquet, but there was simply no time. Letters came in relentlessly, and unexpected guests started arriving as well. Among the visitors, 2 particularly prominent ones had come to see Enkrid. The problem was,
He can't come right now.
the adjutant's words made Graham break into a cold sweat.
Why?
His subordinates are stopping him. They're saying he can't be interrupted right now.
Damn it. Graham decided he would do his best to stall for time. If those madmen started causing trouble, there would be no stopping them. Rather than deal with that chaos, it was best if he kept them occupied himself. Being the lord of the castle was no easy task.
Ugh.
For a brief moment, Graham missed his days as the commander of the heavy infantry. A deep sigh escaped him, the quickness of thought. For 3 straight days, Enkrid repeated reflection and review. He had no choice but to do so. It was a miracle his body hadn't broken down completely from how much he had pushed himself. Because of that, his physical training was reduced to the simplest of movements. Just a few exercises to maintain flexibility, and swinging his sword in the air to avoid losing his sense of it. The rest of the time was spent on contemplation and review, not that it was particularly boring.
Using your body now is like pouring water into a broken vessel, brother.
Auden's words meant that no matter what he did now, most of it would just leak away, leaving very little to be gained. In the past, before the repetition of today, Enkrid would have kept pushing himself, whether the vessel was broken or not. But now he understood. Rest is necessary when rest is due.
You can only move forward by resting properly, brother.
There was once a goat named Nu in the old days. Nu knew how to walk without rest. After all, he had very strong legs. Goat Nu kept walking without stopping. He thought that surely the reason he had been given such strong legs was to move forward, always forward. So Nu walked without ever taking a break. Upon seeing this, the Lord said, "If you keep walking without looking at the direction, you will not know where you are." Auden began his sermon. It wasn't unpleasant to listen to. Beside them, Teresa knelt and listened along quietly. The two seemed to fit together in a strange way. For one thing, they were both of similar build, which is why people sometimes referred to them as the giant siblings. Looking at them now, it seemed as if their atmosphere had become similar as well. After Auden's sermon and a bit of nagging, Teresa calmly started talking about what had happened. Thinking back to their first meeting, it should have been awkward, but Enkrid had a natural ability to smoothly guide relationships between people. If conversation required skill, Enkrid was quite the expert.
Resting due to injury while we're in the same boat.
Enkrid said.
Yes, indeed.
Teresa replied.
You killed the bishop, so aren't they coming after you with everything they've got?
I'm not sure.
What's your response plan?
I plan to do as much as I can.
Surprisingly, Teresa wasn't very knowledgeable about the news from the church, so trying to get information through her was difficult. However, even in such circumstances, Kreis seemed to be guessing something based on the stories he'd heard.
Lately, I've been learning to sing.
Teresa said out of the blue, Her voice had that characteristic huskiness. It was rough, like the grain of wood, but Enkrid, through his developed sense of hearing honed by his sensory arts, could pick out the good qualities in her voice.
A husky voice, yes.
But it was an attractive voice. Rough, but if you were to craft it into a table, it would be the kind that made for a fine piece of furniture. Enkrid himself had no talent for singing, but he had picked up quite a few songs during his travels. Garrett, despite his rough appearance, had a surprisingly clear and gentle voice, and Enkrid wondered if that might suit Teresa's husky tone in an interesting way.
What were you doing while your leader was rolling around?
Fighting.
I mean, where were you fighting? Are you doing that thing again where you answer like that on purpose? Ah, right, you like getting hit, don't you?
I don't like it.
Yeah, let's go. Let's spar, or should I say let's fight.
On one side, Rem relentlessly lashed out at Dunbachel, almost as if he had been waiting for it. Meanwhile, Ragnar was dozing off in a corner, still in the process of recovering his strength. In the midst of this, talk about whether or not to hold a banquet was floating around, but Enkrid focused on rest, apart from his basic training. Rest for him involved reflection, review, and conversations with his company members. He made sure to eat well.
If they deliver eel, you must try it.
He even went so far as to recommend it. Seeing Ragnar nod in agreement, Rem showed interest.
That picky palate of yours approves. I've had eel before, you know.
The seasoning is different.
Enkrid replied. Enkrid sensed a strange tension in the barracks. He had seen Ragnar and Rem ignore each other with cold indifference countless times, like a cow and a chicken passing each other without a glance. There was a slight air of tension between them, but this kind of thing wasn't new, so Enkrid simply ignored it.
Here's some ointment.
Sina occasionally dropped by and once again handed over some ointment.
Did you raid a fairy treasure trove or something? How did you know?
By now, Enkrid was used to Sinar's fairy-like humor and responded smoothly.
I guessed. I heard you survived and made it back thanks to that guess of yours. Impressive.
With those casual words, Sinar quickly disappeared. In reality, that ointment was homemade. It had a faint herbal scent, stored in a small clay jar worn smooth by use. Although the jar was old, what was inside smelled fresh, so it was clearly made by hand. Even after Sinar left, life carried on as usual. Whenever Enkrid had spare time, he delved deep within himself, reflecting on and reviewing what he had learned. Since he couldn't move his body much, what else could he do? He worked his mind intensely instead, and this time he had gained quite a bit.
Couldn't intuition also be applied in battle?
It seemed very possible. In a broad sense, intuition could help one grasp the critical turning points of victory or defeat on the battlefield.
If I focus on the enemy I'm facing, I could use it in different ways as well.
He had already proven this through his encounter with a knight of the Aspen Royal Knights. The boldness gained from the heart of the beast, the sharpness honed by his sensory arts, and his ability to concentrate. All these combined. What was missing? Reflection is clarity. It is the power to cultivate the eyes that can clearly perceive one's current state. Having done this thousands of times, Enkrid quickly realized what his shortcomings were. More specifically, he knew how to identify what was currently needed and what he was focused on. The answer was obvious. What he needed now was quickness of thought. How to respond to the situation, the moment, the phenomenon. He had to think rapidly, but always choose and act on the best option. It wasn't just about the realm of senses. He had to become accustomed to the very act of thinking itself.
Not intuition.
It's about condensing the thought process. In reality, the three words be intuition contain the intuition derived from experience. The conclusion is quick thinking. If you rely solely on intuition, you'll fall victim to a deceptive sword. How much advantage had he gained from using the Valen mercenary sword technique? Enkrid didn't think he was special. He was always aware that he could fall for the same tricks at any time. It was only natural. Since childhood, after being called a genius and leaving his village, he had lived a life of countless beatings and hardships. That's also why the habit of repeating and training had stuck with him. Once a thought was sparked, it wouldn't stop but burn on. While Enkrid was deeply immersed in his thoughts, things were happening outside, but he didn't care. In fact, he didn't even hear them.
Who are they looking for?
The faint voices outside were ignored. Enkrid delved deeper into himself, further into his own mind.
The knight.
The knight's sword crossed his mind repeatedly. All he could do was read the sword's trajectory. He couldn't even read the knight's breathing, and had to observe countless deaths before he could finally react.
What is the difference?
He knew the difference. But what was the fundamental reason? As he delved deeper, something became clear to him. By surpassing the repeated today, Enkrid gained a new perspective. What was the quickness necessary to save the child? What was needed to break through the wall called strategy? They said the knight's sword was despair. But it wasn't despair, at least not truly. With an expanded perspective and the experience of facing the knight, something inside Enkrid awakened. To surpass the knight's sword, he changed his approach. Instead of blocking, he struck first. It was about overcoming the condition of one move that the opponent had imposed.
Ah,
A small realization flickered like a spark, fading and then igniting again. The moment he became aware of it, Enkrid urged himself toward change. What had he gained from charging forward to save the child?
the will of the moment.
It was the speed needed to exploit the brief moment when someone's attention wavered. That's how will had imbued itself. It was the same even when he was trapped in the framework of strategy. The shackles of foreboding, the sense of evasion, layering an attack intent on top of his senses. Were these all different? No, they weren't. They were the same. They merged into his sensory arts, blending together. He fused them, kneaded them into one. That's how he gained an unreasonable intuition. Hadn't will played a part in it? Yes, it had. He could feel it. It was possible because will had overlaid his intent. It was like realizing rejection to overcome intimidation. What about the crushing sword technique he developed to withstand the knight's sword? At this point, Enkrid hesitated. Should he take a big step forward? It seemed possible, but he wasn't sure if it was the right path. He thought he was simply sitting with his eyes closed, but then it seemed he had fallen asleep as the ferryman appeared before him.
Do as you've been doing.
The ferryman's face faded in and out, then disappeared. Was it advice, or was it interference? Even in moments like this, Enkrid's intuition kicked in. It felt like advice. Enkrid decided to set a marker and continue walking forward, step by step as he had been. He thought that was the answer. With that settled, he opened his eyes.
Hey, how about fixing that habit of falling asleep at the drop of a hat?
Rem's voice came through. Without realizing it, he had once again lost himself in the world of swords.
How long has it been?
2 days.
It was Kreis who answered, but the issue didn't seem to be about that.
You should probably go see the Lord quickly.
Why?
Someone's been waiting for you since yesterday.
Enkrid quickly took stock of the situation. He was inside the barracks, and Auden was nowhere to be seen. Thanks to his heightened hearing, developed through his sensory arts, he could hear Auden talking with someone in the distance.
I took care of it yesterday.
Rem added, his tone a bit disgruntled. Enkrid understood the situation at once. Once again he had lost himself in the world of swords, likely drooling in the process, and his subordinates had stepped in to keep anyone from disturbing him. If the Lord Graham of Castle knew about this, he probably would have let it slide too. It had to be someone significant to pull him out like this.
Who came?
Enkrid asked as he stood up.
Count Molson!
It was Kreis who answered.
In person.
Yes.
Hearing this, Enkrid started moving, Grand Duke of North, a monster with ambition and a noble to boot. If he had come all the way here, it was certainly with some agenda in mind.
He specifically asked to see you. Be careful.
Kreis warned. A noble waiting for 2 days was no small matter. While he could hold out a little longer if necessary, doing so would be foolish. Enkrid was obsessed with swords, but he wasn't stupid. He knew which path was the smoother one. He was a bit hungry, but his mind was clear, and his body was in decent shape.
Wait a moment.
As Enkrid quickened his pace, Kreis followed behind. If there was anything Kreis wanted to say, he'd catch up on his own. Enkrid headed straight for the front of the barracks. There he saw a woman in a thin fur coat, her long black hair standing out, standing with Auden. It was Esther.
Tired of living like a panther.
He quipped. That fur had been so soft and warm. At Enkrid's words, Esther turned her head.
I didn't choose to become a beast.
She was as prickly as ever. That meant she was the same as usual. In front of Auden stood a man with a fierce expression and a woman wearing scale armor. The woman's eyes were half closed, and her gaze seemed to emit a strange light. The man looked as solid as a rock, while the woman stood with perfect posture. Behind the woman, a handful of soldiers could be seen standing in line.
They're asking you to listen to what they have to say before you leave.
Grace spoke from behind, and the woman who noticed Enkrid opened her mouth. She looked him up and down before speaking.
Are you the one called Enkrid?
Yes, that's me and you are.
Sister, see? He's finally come out after waiting.
Auden interjected.
This is the second day. Making the count wait?
The man with the rock-like face spoke, his jaw muscles tightening as he clenched his teeth. He looked like he could chew through solid stone with those muscles. Was his main weapon his teeth? They were at the front of the barracks. The guard on duty looked uncomfortable, but Auden remained calm with his usual serene smile, adding more to the conversation.
Haha, well, now that he's out, that's all that matters, brother. Are you taking the Count's name lightly on this land? Keep that up, and there'll be trouble. You, the big guy.
The man warned, his tone menacing. Enkrid stepped forward, standing between Auden and the man. Auden wasn't one to get angry easily, but he also wasn't the type to let provocations slide. Knowing this, Enkrid intervened. Auden wouldn't lose his temper and start a fight, but it was better to avoid unnecessary conflict. He figured that as long as he showed up, it would be fine.
My apologies for the delay. Let's head over now. It seems this matter should be handled first.
The woman with the straight posture said, speaking for the first time. She was holding a round helmet at her side, wearing a thick fur cloak, and her eyes were unusual. Her pupils glowed white.
A tribe that imbues their eyes with spells,
Esther said from behind. There's a tribe like that? Enkrid glanced at the woman thoughtfully. So what? The fact that her eyes held spells didn't seem to be the important part. Of course, it seemed like that's why Esther had stepped out to join him. She must have been concerned about the presence of a spellcaster. Enkrid's guess was right. Esther had come along, prepared to make the other party pay if they tried any amateur magic tricks. She wasn't about to let anyone cast some frivolous incantations. Enkrid scratched his chin with his right index finger, amazed at how all of this had been done to avoid disturbing him.
Maybe I shouldn't be surprised anymore.
By now he could expect this kind of behavior from them. He was right. The woman with the spellbound eyes spoke again.
We've come from Visar. Someone who has business with you is waiting.
How many nobles could there be in the kingdom of Norilia? Certainly not just one or two. In the grand scheme of things, Enkrid was, in simple terms, just a country bumpkin. He had been to the capital once, but the cost of living was too high, and there was little he could do there. That's why he wandered around the frontier. It wasn't by accident that he went all the way to the coast to find a swordsmanship instructor. Even so, Enkrid knew of Centerpole, the Thumb family, one of the 5 families that made up the kingdom. It was the family Marcus belonged to. The Marquis of Visar, also known by the name Centerpole or the Thumb family, was a family with significant influence in the capital. If Marcus had returned, it wouldn't have been handled like this. It must have been someone else who had come. With just a few words, Enkrid grasped the situation. Quick thinking was useful even in moments like this. He condensed his thought process, decided on a course of action, and spoke.
Let's go together then.
Since their intentions were obvious, this approach seemed acceptable. In fact, Enkrid thought this might be the better course for him. Hearing his words, Rockjaw and Spell-Eyed Woman looked at each other. It was clear neither of them wanted to wait any longer. They had already been more than patient. If it hadn't been for rumors of Enkrid possibly becoming a war hero or a knight, they wouldn't have waited at all. Soon, they both nodded in agreement. A hero has emerged from the border guard of Zira, defeating Aspen and the cultists. He might become a knight. The qualifications of knighthood are being debated. Just from this, Enkrid became the hottest name in the northern part of Norilia.
I need to see him.
It was natural for the interest of all surrounding nobles to be drawn. A peerless hero born on the frontier, such a story is compelling. The public adored him beyond measure. Wouldn't it be advantageous to take him under their wing and announce their own prestige? Could the benefits be limited to just increasing their influence? Do they believe he will become a knight? Few believed that just having the qualities of a knight would make someone a knight. Only a very small number recognized Enkrid. In reality,
A knight? Ridiculous.
that was the common response. However, it didn't really matter if he didn't become a knight. Even if Enkrid didn't, there were still plenty of places where he could be useful. Plenty. To begin with, his combat ability alone was undeniable. Though he didn't become a knight, his skills were on par with a junior knight, and unlike the average lot, he had proven his strength. Didn't they say that he saved a pioneer village from a crisis, and that his name would be inscribed on its walls? Even among mercenaries, there are those called platinum mercenaries, and wasn't he said to rival them? Even if he didn't become a knight, his abilities as a bodyguard were more than enough, and the rumors weren't just about his skills.
They say he's quite handsome too.
His appearance was also devastatingly powerful. How could only his skills have spread? It was only natural for the hearts of a few restless noblewomen to flutter. Supposedly, the mere sight of him made them swoon, earning him the nickname Squad Leader of Enchantment.
I must see him myself.
How could one not be curious? Moreover, Enkrid wasn't a lord, nor was he tied to any specific allegiance. He was merely a company commander. That made him all the more enticing for any noble to bring into their fold. At least, that's how it appeared on the surface. It didn't take long for all kinds of rumors to spread. On top of that, the man Enkrid also brought a political advantage.
If I take him under my wing.
Couldn't he become a way to sneak a foothold into the border guard, which was expanding into a trade city by devouring green pearl? It was entirely possible. For various reasons, the name Enkrid spread far and wide. It didn't take long for it to reach the capital. It started with his name being mentioned in one salon, and it soon reached the queen's ears. Under the starry sky of the palace courtyard.
What do you think, Lua?
At the queen's question, the frog Luagern puffed her cheeks. Grr, grr. It was an expression of pure joy and delight. What had made this frog puff her cheeks like that?
Have you fallen for him as well?
The queen knew that Lua had already met, gotten to know, and traveled with Enkrid. At the queen's question, Luagern opened her mouth.
I fell for him from the first time I saw him.
Though part of the kingdom, the frog was not human. No one expected her to follow human etiquette. That was why Luagarni spoke so freely with the queen. Besides, it was a private moment now. They were sharing conversation over an expensive wine touched by the hands of fairies. A few attendants stood silently around them, each minding their own business.
Because of his looks?
The queen asked as she sipped from her glass. A rare statement then came from Luagern, who, being a frog, rarely paid attention to human beauty.
He's a man whose heart is more desirable than his face.
Then he there.
The queen nodded.
And what about his qualifications as a knight?
He has none.
Though she answered bluntly, the queen's expression didn't change. Luagarni didn't try to read the queen's mind. She was the ruler of a nation. There was no way she would show her true feelings so easily. Moreover, interpreting people's intentions and reflecting them in politics wasn't her strong suit. More than anything, Luagan was simply filled with pure joy.
Will he really go forward?
He doesn't have the qualities of a knight. That much she had seen herself. Yet he moves forward. He changes. He evolves. He dismisses the gaze and opinions of others.
Does he believe he can become a knight?
Logic says no. But before she realized it, Luagarn found herself rooting for him. Part of it had to do with the news that he had beaten a bishop of the cult to death. Every time the cult was mentioned, her cheeks could puff up 3 times more than they were now as an expression of disgust. That's likely similar to how humans grit their teeth. The conversation with the queen was brief. The news eventually reached Marcus as well.
Wow, this is something.
He was wholeheartedly cheering for the man named Enkrid. He even felt sorry that he couldn't help him. In truth, when he heard that the Black Blade bandits and the cultists were storming the border guard, he wanted to pull Enkrid and a few other talents out of there immediately. But they won, and the damage wasn't even that great. In a letter personally written by Graham, all he talked about was how he wanted to quit being a lord, and about this man named Enkrid.
He said that without Enki, everything would have been destroyed.
Marcus stroked his chin as he sat. Looking at the surrounding situation, it seemed that Enkrid was becoming the eye of the storm. How could he not? Enkrid didn't represent the city, but he was being hailed as a hero.
If I can get Enki,
he could exert influence over the border guard. He'd be a fool not to take notice. So how should he prevent that? The more methods prepared, the better, for now.
Let's deal with that bastard Molson first.
Who was the most dangerous among the nearby nobles? Count Molson was the first to come to mind, and it wasn't just because Marcus had a narrow view. He was a dangerous man who called himself the Grand Duke of North. Thanks to him, there were always rumors of an impending civil war.
Molson isn't the only problem, though.
Marcus decided to lean on his family's power. The most beautiful woman of the family had already been sent to the front. It would be great if she and Enkrid hit it off, but he wasn't counting on it. In any case, starting by keeping Molson in check was the way to go.
If only I had stockpiled some gold.
He muttered to himself. If the border guard had enough power to manage things on their own, many problems could be easily avoided. The mind of the war maniac, as he was nicknamed, spun with political calculations. How could he prevent the other local nobles from eyeing the border guard, and more specifically, from targeting Enkrid?
Achievements.
While what Enkrid had done so far was significant, the weight of his future achievements would be different. Each achievement would build a wall of protection around Enkrid. To do that, he would have to act from the center. He could use the conscription system to his advantage.
If I personally submit a request, the palace will recognize its value.
That would send a message that the palace had taken notice, warning any fools not to get greedy. And if the border guard grew on its own, it would be even better.
Not a lord, but a ruler. Now that would suit him better.
After envisioning the final picture, Marcus stood up.
I'm going to see the head of the family.
He would offer all the help needed from behind the scenes. Enki, go ahead and rampage as you please. Marcus left with a spring in his step. This was the most fun he had had in recent times, and it showed in the lightness of his feet. Even Junior Knight Asia had heard the news and was shocked.
He was a strange guy, after all.
The qualities of a knight. Was it really to that extent? Thinking that someone could become a knight simply because they managed to overcome their own. Intimidation was an exaggeration. Still, there was a certain sense of anticipation.
Will I see him here someday?
Could he end up standing beside her as a fellow in the ranks of the knights, or rather as a junior knight? It wouldn't be bad. Though they hadn't met often, he was remembered with a good impression. Unlike Luagarn and Marcus, the leader of the Black Blade Bandits felt as if his stomach was being twisted.
Enkrid.
How could he feel at ease when someone he needed to kill was running wild like that? The leader of the Black Blades began to move his remaining members. One of the nobles whose business was ruined in the past by Enkrid was now acting as his puppet. The leader penned a letter. It was sent to Count Molson and several others, but that wasn't the end. He knew he would eventually be summoned to the capital, so he planned to use every trick he could before that happened. With golden hair, fair skin, and a well-groomed mustache, this time he was draped in soft furs over his trained body. It was Count Molson. He spoke casually with a smile, as if he were meeting an old friend. Enkrid thought that if it came to having a thick skin, this man might be the thickest on the continent.
But there's Rem.
Then perhaps second thickest. No, if thick-skinned people were being considered, there was also Ragna, Jackson, and Audin, not to mention Kreis, who could compete for the top spot if he got involved with Krona. Enkrid excluded himself from these thoughts, naturally assuming that was the right thing to do. If his subordinates heard his thoughts, they might have been tempted to swing their blades at him. In any case, Count Molson truly had thick skin. Previously, he had secretly sent someone called the Elite Slaying Blade, who died after just a few swings, and during the recent battle, he didn't even send reinforcements. He turned his back on them, and now, after all that, he had the audacity to show his face and say, "It's been a while," followed by this ridiculous statement.
But I will keep moving forward me. Thanks to you, I managed to avoid half the troublesome matters.
The Count laughed as he spoke. Enkrid couldn't help but wonder who took care of his mustache. It was always so sharply groomed that it was clear whoever did it had quite the skill. Thinking about how his own hair was getting long, and his beard was due for a trim, Enkrid responded,
Should I be thankful?
Moving forward. Has swinging your keep brain go dull?
The Count spoke, half ignoring the man from the Marquis of Vizar, standing nearby. It wasn't surprising. The Marquis hadn't come himself after all. The person present was merely a member of a branch family. Even so, ignoring him wasn't exactly proper etiquette. It just went to show how arrogant Count Molson was.
I think it should be fine since a member of the Marquis's household is here, even if the Count himself didn't come.
Enkrid was aware that his growing reputation had sparked interest from those around him. Even while he had been resting inside the barracks, he had been hearing talk. Cryas, as usual, had been delivering news non-stop, and of course, Cryas had slipped his own opinions into the mix whenever he could.
It's hard to even greet you. I've been waiting for 2 days, and now, here you are taking the lead.
The woman from the Marquis family seized a moment to interject.
Is there a problem?
At Count Molson's words, the lady from the Vizar Marquis family shook her head.
Of course not.
Their words were filled with underlying tension, both clearly on guard. The atmosphere between the two was tense.
So I hear you've been looking for me.
Enkrid didn't care whether they fought or not, so he got straight to the point. The Count and the lady from Vizar shifted their attention from each other to Enkrid. The woman from the Vizar Marquis family was named Kin Vizar. She came here with 2 objectives. First, to prevent the Count from exerting pressure on the man named Enkrid. Second, if possible, to bring Enkrid into the fold of her family. The first objective was at the request of the prodigal Marcus Vizar. The second was a decision made through the family council. But from Marcus's attitude, shouldn't this Enkrid be friendly toward them? From what she was seeing, he seemed rather aloof. It wasn't impolite, but he clearly wasn't putting in any effort to be friendly.
So it's not just swinging a sword you're good at. Is that it?
The Count spoke again. Enkrid felt like shrugging but held back. There was no point in expressing his emotions to someone like this. Would a simple shrug leave any real mark on this arrogant man? Certainly not. It was an instinct and a certainty.
The surrounding nobles are after me. They dream that by securing me, they can gain control over the border guard, which is set to become the largest city in this rapidly developing area. Is he smart?
Kin thought to herself. He had a clear understanding of the political situation. Didn't they say he hadn't come out for 2 days, supposedly lost in some epiphany? Of course, Kreis had likely given him a heads-up in advance. Even without much time to grasp the situation, understanding came easily when it was explained well. Enkrid continued.
I'm not interested.
Not interested?
No.
Do you intend to do difficult?
Is that how it seems to you? I hope not.
The small reception room was quiet, yet Count Molson's eyes seemed to gleam. Sitting on the sofa, he had one leg crossed over the other, but he uncrossed it and straightened his posture. Kin could feel a shift in the Count's demeanor, and Enkrid, looking at the Count, was reminded of Krang. It was just like back then. The mood was changing. The Count placed his hand on his thigh. He sat up straight, taking a more formal stance.
But I will keep moving forward. There is a threat to the kingdom be destroyed. Yet, it hasn't been dealt with. Who can be blamed for that?
The Count's voice wasn't loud, yet it felt heavy as if it pierced through the air. In an instant the atmosphere shifted.
But I will keep moving forward. To beasts, and then are dying those who are left behind.
The Count continued.
Do you wish Simware?
For a brief moment, images of people, either dying or struggling to survive, overlapped behind the Count. There was a child dreaming of becoming an herbalist and a woman making seasoned jerky. There was a mother who had sent her child to the military and a soldier who picked up a spear to protect his family. The soldier collapsed, bleeding from his eyes, nose, and ears.
But I will keep moving forward. So, I ask you, if someone wishes to have you on their side, what must they give in return?
The Count's words carried a certain persuasive weight. Even though Kin was watching closely, she found herself unable to speak. If he wanted something, he would give whatever it took. Moreover, if one sought to walk the right and just path, this seemed like the way to go, as the Count was declaring with his entire presence, and it wasn't necessarily wrong. Kin knew that Molson's territory was wealthier than any other in the area. This man was someone who took responsibility for his words. He had the power to influence those around him just by speaking.
But I will keep moving forward. If you wish to save people, can you say the path you're walking now is the right one?
The Count's voice filled the reception room. It felt overwhelming. To remain in that room, it seemed one had no choice but to agree with his words. Kin was sweating with tension, cold sweat. The Count was showing determination instead of his usual calm demeanor. It seemed like there was no choice but to give the answer he wanted, to tell him he was right, to say you would follow his words. It felt like the only option. And then Enkrid.
Zira. Ah, my apologies. I got lost in thought for a moment.
Zira? Did he say that? Kin thought she had heard him mutter something like that. Though he didn't explicitly say it, it sounded like those words had slipped out. Enkrid was disgusted by the Count's act. It irritated him. These were the words of a man hiding his true feelings. The term hypocrite was meant for people like this. If it were Rem, not someone like himself, he might have swung his axe and caused a scene. But Enkrid wasn't that type of person. Instead, he responded with polite language. If his words caused even a small ripple in the Count's heart, perhaps that would ease his own discomfort. Sometimes you have to let your feelings out to bring peace to your mind. Only then can you be certain of the path you walk. What people call knighthood is not just some empty term, but a matter of protecting what must be protected. Among those things was Enkrid's own heart. Sometimes that too had to be protected. Now was one of those moments. Since he couldn't outright fight, his best option was to translate his emotions into polite words. The moment Enkrid opened his mouth, the illusion wrapped in the Count's charisma shattered, and the smile on Count Molson's face deepened. Kin held her breath for a moment.
This guy is a lunatic.
Kin instantly read the madness hidden behind Enkrid's facade. Regardless of his appearance or skills, there was something deeply wrong with his character. She immediately grasped the essence of Enkrid. Kin had honed her ability to assess people while handling external matters for the Visar family, and that skill was now shining brightly.
A madman.
What if the Count accuses him of insulting nobility right now? Or worse, what if he returns home and raises an army because he's offended? Even in the central government, the Count was a troublesome figure. It was known that he had several knights of considerable skill under his command. No one even knew the full extent of his actual strength. Kin couldn't help but wonder why he had been lying low, biding his time until now. She swallowed hard and watched the Count's lips, waiting for his response. Meanwhile, Enkrid remained composed.
He talks so well.
People killed by monsters? People slain by beasts? Those left behind? Does a man who claims to care about these things send no reinforcements and simply turn away? No, this is the same man who ignored even his own family. Is Edin Molson some child he picked up off the streets? Otherwise, why has his name barely ever been mentioned? Edin Molson even expressed a desire to be dispatched to the Green Pearl garrison upon hearing that his father had arrived. That was exceedingly strange behavior.
He used sparring with me as an excuse to stay here.
At some point he stopped sparring altogether, gradually withdrawing, and now he's abandoned even his public excuses and simply fled. Though Kreis had said something when he arrived.
I will keep moving forward. Well, just looking at him gives that impression, but what's scarier is that he's willing to aside his own son.
Enkrid now trusted his instincts more. Those instincts were telling him that there was a winged chimera sitting right in front of him, one that had swallowed dozens of snakes. In other words, what he saw now was a facade. The mask was flashy, but seeing through it only made it all the more revolting.
Is it not working?
The Count's demeanor changed quickly. He didn't get angry. Instead, he responded like a merchant from the marketplace, causing the atmosphere to become slippery and uncertain.
But I will keep moving forward. It's not working. I heard if you hadn't stepped up, our losses would have been greater, and that you later crossed the battlefield, risking your life.
It wasn't entirely false, but there were plenty of details he could correct if he wanted to. However, Enkrid didn't bother. What's the point of discussing it at length?
Yes, that's what they say.
Yasif is cower.
I'm still recovering from battle fatigue and haven't had time to think.
Of course, that was nonsense. He had made 2 nobles, one of whom was the head of a family, wait 2 days while he was off in his own world. What battle fatigue could he possibly be talking about?
But I will keep moving, guard.
I did.
But I will keep moving forward. What do you think would happen if you fought him?
Enkrid paused to think. Honestly, the moment he saw the guard, he wanted to face him, but now wasn't the time. He shouldn't. If he fought now, he might unintentionally kill the guard. Unless his opponent was significantly weaker or had superior skills, there was a chance he could die. Enkrid couldn't control his strength properly at the moment.
I don't know.
You're no fun.
Would it be fun if I assured you that I'd win?
That would make it exciting.
Behind the Count stood his usual guard. It was clear that the guard was listening to their exchange. The Count was speaking loudly enough for him to hear. In other words, it was a provocation. The guard didn't bother to hide his hostility. He stared at Enkrid with eyes that said, "If you come at me, I'll crush you in an instant." Enkrid cleanly ignored him. Normally, he wouldn't avoid a fight. He'd jump in right away. Anyone who knew Enkrid might start to worry if he had a fever.
Then I'll just be the boring guy.
But I will keep troublesome for you. After I leave, will you be all right?
I'll be fine.
The corners of the Count's lips lifted even more as he watched.
It was a needless worry.
The Count laughed heartily and stood up. The guard, seeing the Count's movement, immediately withdrew his hostility. He stepped aside, waiting for his master to pass. Watching them, Enkrid thought the guard was no different from a loyal dog. Does he get his treats on time? Is he taken for walks regularly? Who knows?
But I will keep moving forward. If you ever feel like it's not too late, you're always welcome,
the Count said as he turned to leave.
Yes.
Take care of my son and daughter. Will you? It seems they both want to leave my protection.
The Count was a meticulous man. If he wanted to bring Edin Molson back, he could do so at any time, and he didn't hesitate to mention the presence of his daughter, disguised as a man, whom Edin had brought along. Of course, Enkrid was already aware of this. Anyone sharp would have noticed by now. Surely, all the members of his unit knew.
I won't be going far.
After making them wait 2 days, he had the nerve to say he wasn't going far. Graham, the lord of the castle, stepped outside to see the Count off as per his request.
Your Excellency, Count.
But I will keep moving forward. Isn't that the captainess of your company? He's quite cheeky. How about we take care of him with a quick hanging?
Even as he walked away, the Count threw out a joke. Graham, sweating profusely, responded,
If you hang Captain Enkrid of the Independent Company, I'll be stoned to death by the citizens.
He was saying that the city had made him a hero. Hearing this, the Count burst into laughter once again. He spoke with his hearty laugh.
It's just a joke.
But was it really just a joke? Enkrid watched the Count depart with his eyes. Soon the door to the drawing room closed. The soldiers standing guard outside stood as if they saw and heard nothing. Getting involved in such matters would cost them more lives than they had.
Are you crazy?
At last Kin spoke. She had been holding her breath, watching the heated exchange unfold.
I hear that often.
Enkrid still seemed calm.
No, but if you do things like that.
She must have been too shocked to continue. After all, she wasn't stupid. She had made it this far. Enkrid's eyes landed on the leftover refreshments in the drawing room. He popped one into his mouth. He was hungry. Hadn't he just gone 2 days without eating? Munching on the cookie, Enkrid spoke.
So, did you hand over the border guard to the Count's domain?
That's ridiculous.
Kin was there to make sure neither Enkrid nor the lord of the castle was swayed. She was also acting as a warning from the Marquis of Visar.
If you're going to tell him to step down anyway, the Count won't care whether it's said politely or harshly.
Kin understood. Count Molson was like a loaded crossbow, ready to fire at any moment. If things went awry, that crossbow's bolt could end up pointed at the royal palace, which made him a dangerous figure. It wasn't an option to deal with him immediately, as his strength was formidable, and the central power wasn't united enough to handle it. At this rate, no one would be surprised if the kingdom split in two. Kin pushed aside her distracting thoughts and looked again at the madman known as Enkrid. His words contained a blind spot. Knowing something and acting on it were entirely different matters. This man was not normal. That much was clear to her.
You've got guts.
That was Kin's evaluation.
Are you going to stay and help sort out these annoying problems?
Once again, Enkrid cut straight to the point. Kin shook her head.
Now that the Count has left, we can't stay here. It'll cause more issues.
If rumors spread that the Marquis of Visar had his eyes on this place, it could harm their standing in the central government. Marcus hadn't gone to the capital without reason. He had to consider the political position of his family. Of course, he couldn't afford to be falsely accused of rebellion either. That's why people had been impressed by the leader of the Black Blade Bandits when he had taken down Marcus so effortlessly. When it came to cunning, he was on par with Kreis.
So,
are you telling me to leave immediately?
Kin asked in disbelief. Did this guy realize she had waited here for 2 days? Moreover, didn't people usually turn their heads to look at her? If she was lucky, they'd only look once, but often men and women alike couldn't help but turn multiple times. The name Kin Visar was known even in the capital as a beauty. How many young men had shed tears and pined for her in agony when she traveled away for work? But this guy? He was so refreshingly indifferent.
Do you have something urgent to do? Didn't you say it was troublesome for you?
He was right. Kin stood up. She had to go. It was time to leave. There was no point in staying longer. Still, couldn't she stay for one more day? As she stood, her guard came close and whispered to her.
He's an unusual man.
Her guard had somehow cast a spell in her eyes. The two were as close as sisters.
He's a madman.
Kin muttered as she took her first step. So this was how the squad leader of enchantment made his first impression. If that was the case, it was an effective approach. Though she wasn't sure what to think of him as a man, her interest was definitely piqued.
He's unusual. Well then.
Enkrid repeated the same words. Was he telling her to leave already? Kin felt a wave of irritation but forced herself to ignore it and began walking. A brief farewell followed. Once Kin left, she saw a bunch of nobodies who had been lingering nearby. They included minor nobles, wealthy merchants who had purchased titles with gold coins, and even some hereditary nobles. Among them were a few noble women who had come to catch a glimpse of Enkrid's face, a gathering of people with no real power, though perhaps some had come with the backing of certain factions. In any case, they were all like a pack of jackals trying to catch hold of the luck called Enkrid.
The jackals of the political arena.
There probably wouldn't be any real danger, but they would be a headache to deal with every time. How would it all turn out? Kin decided not to worry. This was the man who had managed to ensnare even Count Molson with his smooth tongue. He wasn't someone she needed to worry about. As Kin left the city, she looked back 3 times. Then, suddenly, a thought came to her, and she swore.
Shit.
The guard, who was like a sister to her, turned her head. She had just boarded the carriage.
Kin? That bastard didn't even ask for my name.
Despite being a recognized beauty, she was treated like this. It felt as if her family's influence and her looks had been completely ignored, and yet she didn't entirely hate it.
This is a first.
A crazy bastard like him. That's why she wanted to see him again. Kin made up her mind. The guard, who was like a sister, worried about her mistress. Kin had a flaw. She could be obsessively persistent about useless matters. There were many nobles and merchant guilds coveting Enkrid.
I can't handle this on my own.
Graham raised both hands in surrender, and Enkrid stepped forward.
If you come to my estate, you can be with my daughter.
The first one was an idiot who wanted to sell his daughter. Enkrid brought Esther along.
Is it okay for her to stay in human form?
It's fine.
Esther's appearance was so striking that anyone with even half a brain would turn to look. If Kin had seen her, she would have nodded in agreement, understanding why Enkrid wasn't interested in her looks.
Well,
The noble who was trying to pawn off his daughter quickly clammed up, on the contrary.
What is the lady's name?
Another idiot appeared, trying to make a move on Esther. Enkrid had to intervene quickly. Esther was about to act without even asking for permission to kill the man. After that, he began bringing Sinar with him instead. He couldn't go around producing dead nobles, after all. Sinar, at least, wouldn't kill anyone immediately. But Sinar had a downside, too.
He's my fiancé.
Strange rumors began to spread. People were saying that the squad leader of enchantment was engaged to a fairy and a witch. Enkrid didn't bother correcting it. If he left it as it was, at least no one would try to use their daughters or beauty tricks on him.
Why don't you take me along?
I've got some free time as well.
Dunbachel and Teresa spouted nonsense at one point. Both of them were considered beautiful, but taking Teresa would lead some nobles to misunderstand and think she was brought along to beat them to death, and Dunbachel, in some ways, had even quicker hands than Esther. He figured it was better to let strange rumors spread. When merchants came talking about gold, he brought Kreis along.
If you join my merchant guild, you'll gain wealth beyond your imagination.
Sure, how much? What? How much exactly?
Kreis was cold.
Don't even talk to me if it's less than 100 gold coins. Also, don't even think about this being a one-time thing. The contract is monthly, and I get a share of the profits. By the way, what's the name of your merchant guild?
No merchant was willing to part with shares.
That's ridiculous.
The door's over there.
You insolent wretch.
Got a problem with that?
It all ended when a few members of the reserve unit appeared behind the enraged merchant. The guards who had come with him just stood around, hesitant. Even if they weren't part of the madman platoon, the reserve unit's strength was superior. These were the men who had survived battles against the Aspen forces. If the merchant said the wrong thing, it would be his own life at stake. Though he ground his teeth in frustration, he wisely kept his mouth shut and withdrew. There were others who tried to flaunt their authority as well. At times, Enkrid felt the urge to send Rem to crack their heads open, but he held back, preferring to keep things peaceful.
Join my ranks. It will elevate your honor. I could even recommend you to a knighthood. And yet, you dare refuse me.
Enkrid, still in the mindset of keeping things amicable, replied.
Swords don't have eyes.
With that rather cliché line, he handled the situation.
You insolent wretch, how dare.
With a swift motion, Enkrid swung his hand, cutting a lock of the noble's already thinning hair. The noble's mouth clamped shut immediately.
A mosquito.
What mosquito could there possibly be in the middle of winter? The noble didn't dare pursue the matter further. After all, his opponent was looking at him with eyes that seemed capable of burying him at any moment.
Can you really handle it this way?
The lord of the castle asked, concerned.
What if he truly has a large army and declares war on you?
Well then, we'll fight and thank him for it afterward.
Christ responded in Enkrid's stead. The border guard was undeniably the most powerful force in this region. However, they were lacking in gold. Thus, what they needed most urgently was krona. City expansion was essential, but without krona flowing smoothly, they figured they might as well devour anyone who challenged them and take war reparations in the process. In any case, Christ kept turning them away, again and again. Sinar and Esther also helped fend them off, and Enkrid was constantly being called out. After about 2 weeks of this, Enkrid realized that his body had largely recovered. His senses had returned. He no longer had to worry about accidentally killing someone. He sighed in satisfaction. What would have happened if he had fought the Count's guard back then? He didn't know for sure, but he likely would have killed or seriously injured the man. It was in moments like these that everything he had learned and trained for flashed before him. He hadn't fully mastered it yet, so his control wasn't perfect. That's why, for the past 2 weeks, even though it felt like a waste of time dealing with trivial matters, it had also been a period for him to hone his skills as much as possible. With his control back, the urge to swing his sword freely surged within him. And, as luck would have it, today no noble or merchant had come looking for him. Enkrid returned to his barracks. He had been too busy lately to visit it often. When he stepped into the barracks, the atmosphere felt familiar to him. The silence, the tension in the air. It was heavy, as if something could erupt at any moment. It was a dangerous scent, one he hadn't encountered in some time, but it was all too familiar. Just like the first time he had set foot in the chaotic barracks of the troublemaker squad.